Good evening, everyone. Have you ever been asked a simple question like, "Do you like jazz music?" and you paused for a second? You thought, well, I do have that one Miles Davis album. I listen to it when it rains. And I did go to that free concert last summer, and then you finally answered, you know what? Yeah, I think I do like jazz. That tiny, strange pause is what we're exploring tonight. It's the moment you become an outsider looking in at your own life. We tend to believe we know ourselves through deep introspection, staring out a rainy window, plumbing the depths of our soul. But a great deal of psychological research suggests we actually figure out who we are by doing the opposite, by observing our own behavior, just as we would watch a friend. Tonight, we're diving into the fascinating and sometimes surprising ways we learn about ourselves. We'll explore theories from Schachter, Behaviour, and others, using real-life examples that will make you see your own decisions in a completely new light. Let's begin with one of the most powerful forces in our lives, our feelings. Part 1. My heart is racing, so I must be in love, the misinterpretation of emotion. Imagine you're walking across a bridge. Not just any bridge, but a terrifying, ropey suspension bridge swaying high above a rocky river. Your heart is pounding. Your palms are sweaty. A classic fear response, surely. Now, halfway across, you're met by a beautiful stranger who asks you to fill out a survey. Your brain is searching for a reason for that pounding heart. It's asking, why am I so aroused right now? Is it the terrifying bridge? Or is it this incredibly attractive person standing in front of me? This is a famous real-world scenario based on Schachter's theory of inferring emotions. He proposed that we infer our emotional state from a combination of internal arousal, that pounding heart, and our interpretation of the external cues around us. In this case, the man on the bridge mislabels his fear-induced arousal as attraction. He thinks, wow, this person is really making my heart race. He might even ask them out. If he had felt that exact same pounding heart sitting safely on a park bench, he would have labeled it as boredom or a need for coffee, and the stranger would simply have been a person with a clipboard. So, we don't always know why we feel what we feel. We look at the world around us for clues. Scientists have even tricked people into this. There's a famous study on something called false feedback. Researchers hooked participants up to what they thought was a real heart monitor. Then they showed them pictures of nude models. For some pictures, a fake machine made a loud thumping sound, implying their heart rate had spiked. Later, when asked which pictures they found most attractive, the participants consistently chose the ones they thought had made their hearts beat faster. They used the perceived physiological response to infer their own attraction. Now, let's fast forward to today. Imagine a speed dating event with a high-tech twist. Every participant wears a smart badge that displays a real-time heart score. A man named John is talking to two women. When talking to woman A, his badge flashes heart rate 95 BPM. When talking to woman B, it flashes heart rate 62 BPM. John sees the numbers and thinks, wow, look at that! My heart was racing for woman A. I must really be into her. The catch? The numbers are completely rigged by the event organizers. In reality, his heart rate was probably spiking because he just walked up a flight of stairs, but he uses that false feedback to build a story about his own romantic interest. We are surprisingly willing to let external cues tell us what we feel. Part 2. I do it, so I must be it, the clues in our own actions. So we look outside ourselves to understand our feelings. But what about our beliefs and passions? Where do those come from? This brings us to one of the most elegant ideas in social psychology, self-perception theory, proposed by Behaviour. Behaviour argued that when our internal feelings are weak or confusing, we learn about ourselves by simply observing our own behavior. Think back to that jazz question. You're unsure how you feel, so you become a detective investigating your own life. You observe your own actions, Well, I go to jazz clubs every weekend, I own a lot of recordings, and I'm always reading about jazz history. From these observations, you draw a logical conclusion. I must really love jazz. You inferred your passion from your actions. We also make attributions for our actions, just as we do for other people's behavior. Let's say you accidentally snap at a colleague. If a friend did that, you might think, wow, they must be really stressed out. But when you do it, you lack a clear internal reason. You didn't intend to be rude. So, use the same logic you'd use for your friend. You observe your own behavior, the snapping, and you conclude, I guess I'm just really stressed out today. You attribute the cause to yourself based on what you did. You are, in a very real way, a stranger to yourself. This even works with our imagination. Simply imagining ourselves behaving in a certain way can shape our self-concept. Consider David, who has always dreaded public speaking. His self-concept around communication is built on a history of blushing, stumbling over words, and watching audiences lose interest. When he is asked to deliver a keynote at a family wedding, he initially panics. Instead of rehearsing out loud, he spends 10 minutes each evening for 3 weeks sitting with his eyes closed, vividly imagining the entire experience but with a twist. He sees himself walking calmly to the microphone, making eye contact with warm faces and speaking in a steady, unhurried voice. He imagines pausing at the right moments, hearing his own voice fill the room with clarity, and feeling a quiet, grounded confidence rather than terror. By the time the wedding arrives, he notices an internal shift. I wasn't just pretending anymore. I started to think of myself as someone who could speak in public. The image of calm me felt more real than the old image of panicked me. His speech goes smoothly, and the experience permanently alters his self-view from I am a nervous speaker to I am someone learning to speak confidently. By repeatedly imagining himself performing the desired behavior, David's self-concept began to absorb the confident speaker as a genuine possible self. The mental imagery did not just practice a skill, it shifted his identity narrative. He moved from this is who I am to this is who I am becoming, and that new self-belief directly influenced his actual behavior on the day. The imagery served as evidence to his brain that he was capable, gradually rewriting the old story. Part 3, It's mine, so it's better, the power of ownership and association. Now, let's look at how our sense of self extends to the world around us, sometimes in remarkably subtle ways. This is where we enter the realm of implicit self-associations. Have you ever heard of the name-letter effect? It's a strange but well-documented phenomenon. People tend to prefer the letters that appear in their own name. This isn't a conscious thing, but it can subtly influence major life choices. On a statistical level, people are slightly more likely to live in places or pursue careers that resemble their names. A man named Dennis might feel an inexplicable pull toward becoming a dentist. A woman named Laura might find the field of law more appealing. It's as if we're subconsciously drawn to things that reflect our own identity. This extends to our possessions, too. There's a powerful concept called the endowment effect. We value things we associate with ourselves more highly simply because they are ours. Imagine you're selling your old smartphone. You list it online for $300. You know similar models are selling for $200, but in your mind those scratches are barely noticeable, and the battery wear is minor. Why? Because this was your phone. Served you well. It's part of your life story, so it feels inherently more valuable. Or think about assembling a piece of furniture from IKEA. After spending 4 hours building a complex bookshelf complete with a few choice words and one leftover screw, you value it far more than a similar pre-assembled one. Even if it has a slight wobble, it is your creation. You built it. You wouldn't trade it for a sturdier model from a friend. Your labor and ownership have been baked into your perception of its value. Part 4, Will I still love drawing if you pay me? The over-justification effect. This idea of observing our own actions has a major consequence, especially for parents, bosses, and anyone who gives out rewards. It's called the over-justification effect. The principle is straightforward. External rewards can sometimes kill our internal motivation. If we start to attribute our behavior to an outside force, like a payment or a prize, we lose sight of our intrinsic interest. Consider a child who absolutely loves drawing. She does it for hours, purely for the joy of it. That's intrinsic motivation. Now, imagine a parent wants to encourage this. They try what researchers call a task-contingent reward. They say, if you pick up your crayons and draw for 30 minutes, I'll give you $5. The child thinks, awesome! The money for doing what I love. She draws, she gets the money. But then, what happens when the reward stops? The child now looks at her own behavior. She asks herself, why was I drawing? The most obvious answer is no longer because I love it. It's because I was getting paid. The external reward has over-justified her behavior, and her intrinsic motivation can evaporate. The better approach is a performance-contingent reward. The parent looks at a particularly wonderful drawing the child has done and says, wow, this drawing is so creative and beautiful. Here's $5 to celebrate your great work. In this case, the child thinks, I got this reward because I'm good at this. The reward acts as positive feedback that reinforces her skill and her identity as a talented artist. It tells her something about herself, boosting rather than killing her intrinsic motivation. The difference is subtle but profound. One approach replaces internal drive with external incentive. The other confirms and strengthens the internal drive. It's a lesson that applies far beyond childhood. Part 5. Look how far I've come rewriting your own history. Finally, we learn about ourselves not just by looking at the present, but by looking at the past. This is called temporal comparison. We constantly compare our current selves to our past selves. And here's where we get a little strategic. Researchers Wilson and Ross found that people often denigrate their past selves. They look back and rate their former selves more harshly than they actually felt at the time. Why? Because it creates a satisfying, convenient story of improvement. Let's look at Lena, an ex-smoker. She quit smoking 6 months ago. When she smoked, she was a high-functioning professional who happened to have a habit she enjoyed despite the health risks. She wasn't ashamed of it, and she managed it around non-smokers politely. Now, however, she tells friends, I can't believe I used to be that person. Standing outside in the cold, stinking of smoke, completely addicted and pathetic. I'm so embarrassed when I think about old me. She shudders dramatically at the memory. In reality, Lena's core personality hasn't changed, she just no longer smokes. But by reconstructing her past self as a disgusting addict rather than a regular person who smoked, she strengthens her new identity as a clean, healthy non-smoker. The harsher the portrait of her past self, the more triumphant her present self feels, and the less tempted she is to relapse. Lena is engaging in strategic denigration of her past self. At the time she smoked, she did not see herself as pathetic or disgusting, those judgments were absent. Now, she retroactively applies them to create a downward comparison that makes her current non-smoking self feel like a superior, transformed person. This self-serving memory distortion boosts her self-esteem and reinforces the behavior change, even though the primary difference between past and present Lena is simply one behavior, not a wholesale character upgrade. The perceived improvement is amplified by lowering the bar on who she was. We all do versions of this. We tell stories of personal growth that depend on making our past selves a little smaller, a little more foolish, a little less enlightened so that our present selves can stand taller. What we take with us. So, what is the larger message in all of this? The core insight of the self-perception perspective is a surprising one. We often don't discover our beliefs and values by looking inward. Instead, we find them by acting in the world and then observing our own actions, just as someone else would. You are not just the author of your life story, you are also one of its most attentive readers. You watch yourself feel, you watch yourself act, you watch yourself choose, and from those observations you build the ever-changing story of who you are. But this also means you have a certain creative power. If you want to become more confident, you can begin by acting confidently and then observing yourself doing so. If you want to sustain a new identity, you can reframe your past to highlight how far you've come. The self is not a fixed monument you uncover through introspection. It is an ongoing construction built from the raw materials of your own behavior, your own choices, and the stories you tell about them. So, the next time you catch yourself pausing to answer a simple question about who you are, remember, you're not stalling. You're doing a little detective work. You're reading the evidence of your own life. And in that act of reading, you are also quietly writing the next chapter. Thank you.